Well, the Supreme Court of Canada has dismissed Burnaby's case against Trans Mountain Pipeline. Now, the city took the case to the Supreme Court to try and stop construction. This after the Federal Court of Appeal dismissed a challenge by the city. It's arguing local environmental interests are being ignored. The federal government approved the pipeline expansion in 2016, but the project faces significant opposition in BC. Danielle Smith from 770 CHQR joins us this morning to continue the conversation on this story. Danielle, what does this all signal for the economy?
What's really interesting is I think we're getting a good education in how our country works and where the power bases lie. We spend a lot of time talking about social license, a lot of time talking about First Nations consultation. But in the end, if the government is doing things appropriately, the court is going to side with the government in its area of jurisdiction to be able to get a project through. I think that that's really instructive because in some ways you almost wish that these legal challenges had been wrapped up prior to the federal government stepping in and buying the pipeline, because it seems that with their process now being affirmed that it did not violate First Nations rights in a number of cases. No, the city of Burnaby does not have the right to be able to stall a federal project. I think the last case we're waiting for is the BC reference case. British Columbia has asked whether the court to determine whether or not they have the authority to dictate what goes through that pipeline. If they can limit it so that they would be able to reject the diluted bitumen. That, I think, is one of the last cases we're waiting on. I'm going to talk to an expert today to see if there's anything else outstanding. But it's just one more example of how the federal government was on the right side on this one, and they could have pushed ahead perhaps without taking the extreme action of buying it outright. But I think this is another step in the right direction.
Yeah, I guess with that appeal now out of the way, the commitment of public dollars, are we going to see this thing go through? Or, I mean, do you foresee it having more hiccups here?
I'm feeling more optimistic about it. I mean, every time I talk about it, I have listeners who say, hey, I know somebody who works for a company and they've been hired to come out and do such and such and so and so. So it looks like things are gearing up. We just had that really that important stamp of approval last week, where it was announced that they had cleared all the hurdles with the NEB to be able to start construction on the first 4 phases of the project. There's sort of 6 segments, and so there's a couple of additional issues that need to be resolved on the last 2 legs, and still some issues that need to be resolved at the local level. But there does seem to be a few things clicking into place. So people, I think, have reason to feel more optimistic than they ever have.
Absolutely, and likely not the last that we'll see of the protests meanwhile. Danielle, thank you for this, and we will tune in today between 9:30 and 12:30 for that conversation.